If you'd just like to all take your seats and make yourselves comfortable, we're about to start the proceedings. My name is Lafina Diamandis, and I'm a GP trainee, an NHS clinical entrepreneur, and I'm also co-founder of Eureka Doc, which specialises in diverse medical careers, education, and careers transformation for doctors. And it gives me great pleasure to be here this evening. I'd like to thank Ravina and Hannah and Sir Bruce Keogh for inviting me to host this event for you, which I'm sure you'll all agree is in one of the most glamorous locations in London. Am I right? Yes or no? Yeah. Absolutely. We're very lucky to be here. I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful evening with each other. We're very, very lucky to be sharing the evening with Sir Bruce Keogh, who is, of course, one of the most senior members of the NHS, being the National Clinical Director for nearly a decade, am I right? Yeah. And tonight's event is, of course, all about medical innovation and leadership, and inspiring, connecting and supporting one another to contribute to each other, to our patients, to our teams, organisations, to society, and of course to humanity. So I hope we'll all really take the opportunity to enjoy our tech hitch. To learn from each other this evening. This evening we're going to hear from a range of people at different stages of their careers. Of course we have Sir Keogh here, but we also have two younger healthcare leaders. Ravina Bannett, who's a fifth-year medical student and, of course, author of her book, A Survival Guide for First-year medical students, which she's going to tell you all about a bit later. And we've also got Hannah Barham-Brown, who will be talking about a number of things, and is, of course, a very inspiring leader too. One of the main reasons this event was formed was actually to empower medical students and junior doctors to contribute to healthcare and to engage each other and give us the support and the confidence to take on leadership roles. So I'd like to, we had to slightly reorder our event, but Hannah's here now, so I'd like to introduce Hannah formally to you. Hannah Barham-Brown graduated from St George's University of London in 2016 and is now a Foundation 2 doctor in South Thames. Prior to medical school, she completed a BA Honours in English and Theology with Arabic at the University of Durham, and also BSc Honours in Paediatric Nursing at Northumbria University. She's just applied for GP training like myself, and having previous experience of running national campaigns and charity work, she took a large part in the media coverage of the junior doctors' contract dispute. And it was really this that started her involvement with the British Medical Association. She's gone from being a grassroots member to deputy chair of the Junior Doctors Committee, which is the role that she currently holds, and all of that in the space of just a year. Hannah's perhaps best known for her campaigning for disability rights, particularly her work around wheelchair funding. And having become disabled herself in her penultimate year of medical school, Hannah had to crowdfund her own wheelchair in order to complete her studies, which is really impressive. Last summer, the BMA's annual representatives meeting unanimously passed her motion that the NHS should work to secure better funding arrangements for this across the country, and her story made it into the national media. Her fight goes on, as only last week she was interviewed by Adrian Chiles on Radio 5 Live about this very topic. So I'm sure you'll all join me in welcoming her to the stage. Give her a big round of applause, please. Sorry, I'll just catch my breath. I promise it's not my phone that's setting it off. I put it on airplane mode and everything. So firstly, I'd like to start with two quick apologies. Firstly, I'm very, very sorry for being so late. I will never rely on London transport ever again, particularly with a stick. It's chaos, I tell you. Secondly, I actually have a bit of an apology to Sir Bruce.
So we have actually met once before, about a year ago, when he came to open the new dementia ward at Kingston Hospital. And as a slightly gobby, vaguely political F1, it was delicately suggested that I should stay in the doctor's office for that event and not come out. And that was my plan. I had it all planned. I was working away quite happily in my wheelchair, because I do that. Unfortunately, I realised quite early on that I needed a bit of paper from another ward, so I thought, it's okay, I'll sneak out. So pull this door open, head down, wheel out, straight into your ankles. I'm really sorry. If he's still walking with a limp, that's probably my fault. I promise it wasn't a big political statement. So firstly, can I just get a bit of a feel for who's in the room? So do we have any medical students here? Excellent, thank God my speech isn't pitched completely wrong. Any junior doctors? Great, good, okay, so that's like 3 of us, fabulous. And then a few assorted others who can claim to be junior if it makes you feel better. So either way, medical students, you are way ahead of me at this stage. So when I was at medical school, medical leadership was what you did if you weren't a particularly enthusiastic doctor to be, or you were a bit sick of sick people. But I certainly wasn't very interested. I didn't have a clue what it was. I didn't really care. I just wanted to go and save lives. But yet, about a year and a half on, here I am, talking at a medical leadership event. So obviously something has changed. So I was brought up in a family where the worst thing you could possibly do was let somebody down. And everybody had a duty to contribute whatever skills, knowledge, abilities they had to the rest of the community. My dad's a priest, we're a bit like that. But the key thing in my family for me was that it was okay to get angry, as long as you did something with the anger that you had. And I'm really good at getting angry. So, as you heard in my little intro there, I became disabled during medical school. I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Anybody actually studied that at medical school? No? Oh my lord, which school do you go to?
Oxford.
Funnily enough, didn't cover it at St George's. Please don't tell me there's anyone from St George's here. Oh good, I'm safe. So yeah, I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which was diagnosed shortly after I took up half marathon running. It turns out if you keep dislocating your knees, that is a very good indicator that running is not the sport for you. I didn't pay any attention for that. I just popped them back in and carried on moving. So I became disabled in my penultimate year, was told I would probably need a wheelchair, and this was all at the same time as the junior doctor's contract dispute was kicking off. Now, unsurprisingly, I was quite angry. Not only because of some of the frankly ludicrous things I had to hear about the profession I was going into, that I'd worked so hard to join, as we all do, but also because as a patient, at that point, I didn't feel I was going to be safely cared for under those proposals. And I was in a bit of a unique position with this. I had a bit more time than the average junior doctor, and I was still a student, so what else are you going to do? I also had a background in communications and in working with the media. And I was a very, very angry young woman whose body had just declared war on her. So I did the logical thing. I went and set up a national campaign. It was called Junior Doctors, Our Lives in Your Hands. Yeah, great. See, you're all big fans. And I basically went out determined to tell the world why I was so angry. And so Al Jazeera, Sky, Channel 4, I even had the BBC's Hugh Pym in my living room in my very grotty student flat for a good hour filming. Never used the footage. Probably should have tidied up before he arrived. And it was this work that kind of led to me being invited to get more involved with the BMA. Some random guy turned up on a picket line I was at and tried to recruit me. I basically told him where to stick it. That guy is Jeeves Wujasuria, who is now chair of the Junior Doctors Committee and who I work with every single day, and he's never forgiven me. So So I attended my first annual representatives meeting of the BMA, which sounds very grand. Basically, it's 4 days in a random city, somewhere in the UK. For me, it was Belfast. Never been to Belfast? I can say it's a lovely city. Anyone from Belfast? Yes! Lovely taxi drivers. I spent a lot of time in taxis. Anyway, so I went to not so sunny Belfast with about 500 other delegates and started to learn a little bit more about the frankly huge organisation that is the British Medical Association. Does anyone really think they know what the British Medical Association does? Right, there's one person, I know who you are, so you better add. Anyone else? No, I'm not putting my hand up either, because I'm still getting to grips with it a year on. It's massive. We're kind of part professional body, part trade union, part lovely social club. I've got lots of friends from it, it's fabulous. But I started to learn a bit about that at the annual reps meeting. And I met role models who I still look up to and still talk to regularly, and they're both clinical and political and leadership. And I met the friends who frankly kept me sane during the F1 year that I hated. I signed up for a few committees. I got up on stage in front of 500 people to support a motion that the NHS should be a little bit more accessible for disabled people. And by that I mean our patients. Turns out quite a few of them are disabled. Shocker. That motion unsurprisingly passed unanimously. And so then I kind of somehow ended up on some committees, including the Junior Doctors Committee. Within 9 months, I got involved enough in that I got voted onto the exec, and 3 months later, here I am as deputy chair, wondering where my life went. So, my work for the BMA is not anything like what I would have expected my life to look like a year ago. So, just take Thursday last week, for example. I spent the morning in a GP clinic, having spent an hour on a bus on the way there writing emails. I then dashed across from Putney to the GMC, which is kind of near Warren Street, and did an hour and a half of filming with them about disability rights and how we support disabled students and disabled doctors and important stuff. And then I speed hobbled, which is a specialty, as I'm sure you can gather, speed hobbled over to BMA House, where I had a meeting on the bullying and harassment work we're doing. And then I speed hobbled over to UCL, said hello to Jeremy Bantham, never seen him before, it's very exciting. And I spoke to about 100 medical students at their Global Health Society's electives event about why they should all go to Ghana. No, about how fabulous electives can be and how it's a really good opportunity to try and find out the kind of doctor you want to be in the future. So, no 2 days are the same in my life anymore. And I really love that I can mix my clinical work and my leadership work. And actually, working clinically alongside my colleagues in the front line really brings a lot to my BMA work, because I know exactly how hard it is being an F2 doctor. It's exhausting. Run while you can. Don't run while you can, we need you. It's really difficult out there, and to be able to sit in front of external stakeholders like NHS employers, NHS England, lots of people, and say, actually, I'm knackered. My colleagues are knackered. How are we going to help? How are we going to sustain this profession? Having that viewpoint is really invaluable in meetings like that. And so it means I can direct the work that we do as an association to be as relevant as possible to our membership. I think that's so important. And I know the BMA has not been without controversy in the past few years. And I'm sure that many of you will probably want to share thoughts with me about our work. That's fine. I know that being the only BMA rep in a hospital can be a tiny bit lonely at times, but I look at it like this. There were two options for me when I got involved. Either I could stand on the sidelines getting angry, and I'm very good at that, or I could throw myself in and try and make the situation a bit better. So, yes, I'm still angry. I'm not going to stop getting angry, but I'm trying to turn that anger into something as constructive as is humanly possible. My work with the BMA also allows me to focus on the issues that I think matter. So, to me, the BMA supports our profession to do our very, very best for our patients. And so, as an association, it's hugely important to look at how our patients experience the health service. I was getting cross about wheelchair crowdfunding on social media for years before I stood up in front of the annual reps meeting and a lot of the world's press and said, this is not acceptable, within 24 hours, I was on the homepage of the BBC News website. That's the kind of effect working with the BMA has had for me. And when they speak, people really do listen. So being able to utilise that is so, so important for any young leader. And I really, really encourage you all to consider getting involved. Please come and talk to me afterwards. I've got some glamorous assistants who are even later than I am, who would delight in talking to you about it as well. So I'm still a little bit surprised when people refer to me as a medical leader. In the same way, I'm still a little bit surprised when I see Dr. Hannah Barham Brown written down on a bit of paper in front of me. That's never going to get old. And as such, it feels a little bit odd to be giving leadership advice to a room of what I have no doubt are some really incredible young people. Particularly as I'm pretty sure I'm one of the few in the room that does not own a single science A-level. So here goes. My key piece of advice, apart from getting angry, and I can give you some tips, is to find your unique selling point. Not only what makes you different, but find that thing that you really care about, that really excites you. I've never had any issues with being the doctor in the wheelchair. She's really sorry she can't be here today. My shoulders keep dislocating, so I can't currently use her. I even have a blog called Wonky Medic. It's my thing. And while my wheelchair, or my stick, doesn't define who I am, I'm a bit more memorable than I am without it. And when I, as a doctor, speak about disability issues, people do listen, because I clearly live these issues every single day. So my advice to you is do something you're really passionate about, because if you don't love it, you won't enjoy it, and you certainly won't give it your best. And most importantly for any leader, if you don't love it, no one's going to listen to you. So there are lots of leaders out there, and I have no doubt there are very many future leaders in this room. So I'm just going to leave you with one simple question to ponder. What makes you interesting?
Thank you, Hannah. That was a fantastic talk, and I, for one, will be having a look at Wonky Medic. I'd now like to introduce to you Professor Sir Bruce Keogh. And I don't think any introduction could probably possibly do justice what he has done for the NHS and for healthcare in this country. He's been NHS Medical Director since 2007 and the National Medical Director of NHS Commissioning Board for NHS England, as well as being a cardiac surgeon. How do you fit it in? He's published several significant national reviews, including a review on medical and dental school intakes, the Keogh Mortality Review into Patient Safety, which was in response to the Francis inquiry of Mid-Staffordshire hospitals, and he led a forum on how to move the NHS towards a greater 7-day service. So Bruce has established the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management to ensure leadership access to all doctors, and subsequently administered the Clinical Advisor Scheme in the Department of Health. He's encouraged medical innovation throughout NHS England, in particular through the NHS Innovation Accelerator Scheme, and has approved several apps recently. He was appointed a Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2003 and was ranked by the Health Service Journal as the most influential clinician in the English NHS. We would like to honour all the work that he's done for NHS England and to wish him well, as he will soon be becoming the chair of the Birmingham Women's and Children's NHS Foundation Trust. So please join me and give Sir Bruce a warm welcome.
Well, folks, thank you. I've learned something tonight, and that is never follow Hannah as a speaker. You were fantastic. Anything I say is only going to sound really pretty boring. But Ravina's asked me just to say a few words, I suppose, about myself and some of the things that I've learned on the way in my career. And my career starts many years ago in Africa, where I was born in Zimbabwe, and I encountered orthopedic surgeons at a pretty young age. You might argue that's not a good thing. And at that point I decided I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon about the age of 4 or 5. And then gave way to wanting to be an astronaut and various other things which clearly never happened. And when I was, I suppose, a teenager, they did the first heart transplant in South Africa, the first human heart transplant, and everything was all over the newspapers. I thought it was fantastic. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be a heart surgeon. And that turned out to be the case. But there was a really important intervening bit in the way, and that was I was sitting in the garden one day listening to a green and white transistor radio, and there was a program about this thing called the National Health Service in England, and I listened to it and I thought, that sounds really good. Now I knew, even though I was relatively young, that I lived in a country of great inequality, great injustice, and unfairness, particularly for people who were ill. And I didn't, even at that age, I didn't like it very much. And I went inside and I asked my mum about this thing called the NHS, and she said, well, she explained it, and I said, I'd like to be a doctor there one day, and I'd like to train as a doctor, which I subsequently did. So I arrived in this country at the age of, I'm guessing now, about 18, 19, with 250 quid and a rucksack. I applied to numerous medical schools. I was officially rejected by 19, and a number of others told me not to bother to apply. So the first lesson is hang in there when the going gets tough, because it will do during the course of your careers. But you know, once you get into medical school, that's a terribly exciting thing, because it's a fulfillment of an ambition or a dream that you've had for quite a long time. And once you're in there, it's a great leveler. You know, everybody's the same, once again. And you'll find in your careers that there are a number of great levelers. When you come out of medical school, all of a sudden there's a chance for you to recalibrate again. You go into a job that you've applied for, and you find that people don't know what you were like as a student, and you can kind of reset your expectations and your professionalism. One of the things I could have done with, though, when I went to medical school was Ravina's book. I guess you've all had a chance to look at it. It's sort of everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. And I'm sure it's something that parents wanted to know but were afraid to ask. So I think it's going to find a great place, and well done to you for that, actually. It seems to me that during the course of my career, I thought that there are two values that are really important if you want to be a good doctor. The first of those is compassion, and the second is a sense of fairness, because that gets right to the very heart of what we try and do in the NHS and what we sometimes fail at. I mean, you've heard from Hannah about your blog and saying what it's like to be a patient. We don't always look at stuff from the point of view of patients, and I have plenty of examples of that, but yours is a pretty eloquent one. I think there are 4 principles as well. The first is, I think you need to have discipline, self-discipline, and that only comes from within. And that discipline, largely through the course of your career, is about staying up to date, is about making the effort to stay up to date and to know your subjects well. Because if you don't, you fall behind. And over a period of time, it starts to separate excellence from mediocrity, happiness in your career from despair, success from failure. And it has quite a significant impact. It just strips away year after year. But the other bit of discipline, which I try to adhere to, never speak ill of your colleagues. You will hear plenty of people during the course of your career trying to better themselves by speaking ill of others. It doesn't work. It lets yourself down, really. The second principle, I think, is integrity. At some point in your career, whatever route you take, you will find that your integrity is challenged, whether it's over money, whether it's over authorship on a scientific paper, whether it's over credit for diagnosis or something. Just, when you do something well, just take it gently, don't advertise it, and when you do something wrong, be prepared to kind of admit that. And in a sense, that leads me on to the next principle, which I think is really important, is responsibility. I spent some time at St George's, so as a senior registrar in cardiac surgery, and when I was appointed a consultant at the Hammersmith Hospital at that time, I said to my boss, I said, so I see the patients in the outpatients clinic, I operate on them independently, I take them back in the middle of the night, I'm in charge of the cardiac intensive care unit, so what's going to be the difference when I become a consultant? And it was a really interesting answer that stuck with me. He said, it's taking responsibility for other people's mistakes. And during your career, you will find an increasing escalation in that direction. When you're, an F2, you have to take some responsibility for the mistakes of an F1, or you're further up the training scale and you have to take it for other people. It's just happens to you during the course of your career, and it's unavoidable. But another important thing that I discovered was something that Harry Truman, one of the presidents of the United States, said. He said, you can achieve anything you want, provided you don't mind who gets the credit. And I've worked, some of the most inspiring people that I've worked for have been people that have simply given me credit, where they've just let me loose to do something, and they've been prepared to take the risk that I might mess up and do something wrong. And if you can do that for others, it's something that's really very, very rewarding. And the final principle I think that's very important is respect. You should respect your colleagues and respect all the members of the team that you work with. It's so easy to think that other people have a lesser contribution to make, or you don't feel the same respect for them because they come from a different social class, they're a different religion, they're different in some kind of way. And all you do is demean yourself with that. Because if you wait long enough, are decent enough to try and understand what other people have to bring to the party, everybody in your team will have something really important to bring to the party. And increasingly, doctors are simply part of a wider healthcare team where there are other people who know more about stuff than you do. And it's that respect that eliminates arrogance and I think makes you a better person. Now, I'd just like to say something about quality in the NHS. Ravina asked me to say something about that. One of the things that I hope has been a contribution over the last few years has been an understanding of quality. I got asked nearly 10 years ago to go away and think about what quality was in the National Health Service, and I had a deputy whose mum was about to undergo coronary bypass surgery. She was 80, and she asked 3 questions. She said, what's it going to be like? Is it going to work? And is it safe? And putting that into kind of bureaucratic English takes you into a place where quality can be measured in terms of clinical effectiveness, patient safety, in other words, stopping, I'll come back to safety in a minute, and patient experience. And my view is that the NHS is still very weak on patient experience. You know, we design a lot of our services, we approach a lot of our patients in a way that's of greater convenience to the NHS than it is to the patients. And by safety, I mean that when you have a decent consultation with a patient, at the end of it, they know that their disease has certain risks, they know treatment has certain risks, and then they make a value judgment as to whether they'd like to proceed with the treatment or not. What they should never have to consider is that the way we design, deliver, or execute our services has a negative impact on that risk. And you know, that's where real clinical leadership, where the sorts of people who are in this room can have a big impact. When I was, in old-fashioned language, an SHO and a registrar, I would see things that were really dodgy, and I would see things that were really good. And when you tried to change the things that were dodgy, people would say, hey, look, you know, you're not going to be around here for very long. Just go with the flow, and it'll be better in the next place you go to. And I tried to resist that, and I would encourage all of you to resist it. Because I have a great belief that young doctors, in particular, who move from hospital to hospital, are our best agents for change in the NHS. They see where good things are, they see where bad things are. One of the things that I've tried to do is to get the NHS actually to listen to that, with varying degrees of success in different organizations. But do not underestimate your ability to improve the quality of care, not just from when you qualify, but even as medical students on the wards. Because people do listen. And that's why with actually the British Medical Journal, we set up a group called Agents for Change, which is something you may come across during the course of your career. The second thing that struck me is that when I look across at any other industry, if you look out across that great city, there are many businesses that are highly successful. And the businesses that are most successful do several things. They know where their finances are, so they look after their finances. They ask their customers what they want, and they innovate accordingly. We haven't been very good at innovating our NHS according to what our patients want. But there's one other thing they do. They mercilessly seek ideas from the younger generation. So the future of successful industries lies in the creativity, the ambition, the altruism, and the kind of relentless ambition of the young people in that organization. And I don't think we've been as good as we could be in the NHS about doing that. And indeed, we've, over the years, and I've been subject to this, people try and silence those ideas. Don't let them, because the NHS might be run by the old guys like me, but we're only guardians for the NHS of the future. So your ideas are really, really important, and never underestimate that. And never feel too awkward to point out where something's good or something's bad. You may get different responses from different people, but please don't be frightened of that. One of the other things that we've tried to do recently is I was horrified to find that 2 young surgical trainees had to give up their surgical training posts because they had set up a company that tried to bring surgical training onto an iPad. And they were told by the surgical trainer, sorry, you can't be employed by the NHS and run a company. And it seemed to me that in a modern world of technology, those are exactly the sort of people we want in the NHS. So in response to that, by the time I found out about this too late and the guys were running something quite successful, we've set up a clinical entrepreneurs program. So there is now a training program in the NHS where you can carry on with your ordinary clinical training and at the same time get proper support, mentorship and guidance on how to run small businesses and develop new technologies. So I would just like you to think about the kind of contribution that you can bring that's just outside what might seem mainstream clinical practice. It's in keeping, I think, with what Hannah said. Find your USP, find something that really turns you on. And that might be pure clinical medicine. And then you talked about leadership. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because you never think of yourself as a leader. It doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at. But leadership takes many forms. And in my view, the most important leaders we have in the health service are our best doctors. And the reason I say that is that leadership is about inspiring people to want to do better for themselves, want to do better for others. And we all look at somebody who's a really good diagnostician, who brings forensic scrutiny to their patient's illness, is decent to the patient and is decent to their family. That is what a really good doctor does. And we all want to be like that. They are our most important leaders, because when the chips are down, when you're feeling rough, when a member of your family is ill, that's the kind of person you want. You don't want a bureaucrat, you want somebody that can make you feel better. The second type of leadership that comes out of that is during the course of your career you might become interested in how to promote quality. So you might choose to join a Royal College or a specialist association. In my case, I went into the Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons. You might choose to join the BMA. You might choose to join some other organization. But these are all important contributions that you can make through the power of peer groups. If you're interested in education, you might decide to get involved with some of the Royal Colleges. If you're interested in research and you want to probe molecules or something, you might decide to follow an academic career and ultimately become a professor. All of these are different leadership roles. All of them are following your heart, going to the area of your USP, as Hannah describes. And so there isn't one type of leader. And then at the other end, there's a tiny bunch of people who get into kind of medical management. I'm one of those, but I've been through all the other bits as well. So I guess my final message is, if you want to be happy in your career, follow your heart. You will know what you want to do. And don't try and have a career plan. I've certainly never had a career plan. I've seen where career plans have just failed people, and they end up distressed, they end up disillusioned, and they end up disappointed. Follow your heart, and you will be happy and successful in your career if you adhere to the 4 principles that I alluded to. And of course, read Ravina's book. Thank you.
Very sound and inspiring and humbling advice. This brings me on to introduce our next speaker, who, following on from that, is probably one of the most humble and hard-working people I've met recently. Ravina Bannett's a 5th-year medical student from Barts under London, and she's currently involved with our education project, EurekaDoc, which I mentioned earlier, which has been taken onto the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. Ravina's been working with the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management, which is an organisation to promote leadership in doctors, and also established by Sir Bruce. And as you already know, she's written her book, which is more or less being launched this evening, The Survival Guide for First-Year Medics, aimed to encompass all aspects of student life and to assist medical students through their time studying medicine. And I hear this has actually been distributed to BART students. Does anyone have a copy? Any BART students here this evening? Raise your hands. Excellent. And it's also available on Amazon, so I hope you'll all support her in letting people know about that. Ravina's also involved in a number of other projects, which I'm sure she's going to talk to you about shortly. And I hope you'll all join me in giving her a very, very warm welcome.
Professors, doctors, medical leaders and students, good evening. Over 200 years ago, Peter Christian Albigar fired an electric current from an electrode jar to render chickens senseless. 100 years later, this was repeated in a 14-year-old boy's exposed heart in an operating theatre. Subsequently, it was found that an electric shock could prevent an otherwise certain death. Hence, the first defibrillator was created. The shock of electricity can reignite a human life, just as a seed of innovation has the potential to support peers, save a life, or transform an entire healthcare system. This evening, I'd like to take you through 3 aspects. The first, the importance of CPR through a new charity called Make It Beat. The second is an opportunity for you to put your passion and your heart towards a change in your respective universities or professions. And third is an electric spark that inspired me to write a book. At the beginning of university, I recognised that much help was available to get into medical school, but very little to guide the process of medical school life. Which was the best stethoscope to buy? What was the best note-taking method to use? How to manage time amongst academia, family, a social life, societies, and all other commitments. And these were questions that I needed answering, but I didn't know who or where to find my answers. Acknowledging that a step-by-step guide written by my elder peers and those more knowledgeable would be an invaluable aid to me, I was inspired to produce something of value that would potentially benefit others too. A survival guide for first-year medics was written to encompass all the key components of a medical student's life, to assist in making that first step towards their career. The book covers issues such as how to prepare best for exams, time management techniques, and how to organise your student finances. To give you a taster of the book, I wanted to share a short snippet and some golden advice from one of the contributors. Medicine was never to be a breeze through the park, but if you want something enough, you'll achieve it. Nurture your friendships, nurture what makes you tick, nurture the little gifts and the kind moments, because it's these things that will support us through our studies and through our career. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the contributors to the book, who have provided their wisdom to the next generation of medical students. And these ranged from medical school deans, professors, and elder students. I do hope that you enjoy reading it. I'd now like to bring you on to the launch of a new charity called Make It Beat. There is only a 15% chance of survival of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and even lower in some communities. A study conducted by NICE suggested that CPR performed by a bystander doubled the likelihood of survival in an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. It was also found that the sooner CPR was initiated, the greater the chance of survival. Make It Beat provide free CPR education and training for anyone, ensuring that cardiac help is available wherever you go and not just in the presence of medical professionals. Courses are being rolled out to individuals, communities, including Uber drivers, and groups in society, and those highest at risk. The aim is to provide those with CPR education who otherwise wouldn't receive this, despite needing it the most. Sign up to be a CPR trainer, to volunteer, to donate to the cause today at makeitbeat.org.uk. In the words of Winston Churchill, we shall draw from the heart of suffering itself the means of inspiration and survival. So let us learn from those that have suffered and from those that have lost their lives to take action today. As medical professionals, we should strive to be like a heart, an organ with ventricles that contract to its fullest, valves that support one another, and arteries that disseminate medical knowledge for the betterment of our patients. So whether it be a spark of inspiration, a eureka moment, or a futuristic vision that almost seems impossible, allow that to drive you, regardless of how big or small that change may be. Allow that to drive you to innovate and advance our healthcare organisation. Let us be inspired by the evolving medical technologies, from the Da Vinci robotic cardiac surgery, or to the use of Google Glass in surgery. Let us be the innovators and visionaries of today.
That was fantastic. We're now going to move on to a Q&A session, so if you have any questions for any of our three speakers, are you going to take the floor? Are you coming up here, or we're pretty much running on time, so we've got up until about 7:30, and after the Q&A session we'll be enjoying some drinks and some networking. So if any of you do have any questions, then please do raise your hands and we'll get started on the Q&A. Yes, a question from the back, please.
We hear the NHS has not enough money, so is it all going to happen? What's going to happen next?
I guess that's aimed at me.
I'm not going to fight you for it.
Well, there are different ways of looking at it. So we have a tax-funded system which brings the advantages of we pool our risk, we share everything, we share our access to treatment. So when the economy is doing well, we have more money for the NHS. So historically, over the last 70 years, we've had about 4 to 5% per year. And up until the global financial crisis, we had closer to 9% per year. When the global financial crisis struck in 2008, we've had really very little additional money, apart from inflation and a bit more, to keep up with it. In the first 5 years of that, we had a budget of about £100 billion, but demand was going up at 4 to 5% per year. So over a 5-year period, we needed to find efficiencies which were equated to £20 billion, and we managed to do that. As we get further into the second 5-year period, the amount of money that we need to find is closer to 30 billion. And that's really tricky because we picked the low-hanging fruit. And my views that we're underfunded are well known. But there is another context in all of this, and that is that no healthcare system in the world is funded. You just need to look at what's going on in the Senate of the United States. They run a pretty shambolic and bizarre healthcare system which costs almost 3 times as much as ours. And their life expectancy is the same. You look in Germany, they're struggling. You look in Greece, they're struggling. You look in Zimbabwe, they don't have enough money. So one of the challenges for us is, there are 2 challenges really. One is to put a coherent argument to government about why there should be more money for the NHS. But in order to do that, I think we as clinical leaders need to demonstrate that we've done everything we possibly can in order to make the NHS as efficient as it can be. And there are a lot of people out there who don't believe it's as efficient. You know, people have multiple visits to their GPs to get things done, or multiple visits to a hospital to get things that should be done once or twice. And they don't see us using technology in the way we could. So it's a sort of twin-track approach in my view. One is demonstrate that we can do stuff better, and 2, put a coherent argument that in the interests of quality, we need additional cash. But on top of that, I would say we've been through, in my view, the most difficult 10 years financially of the health service. And I think when we look at the amount of money that's available, we were heading into having less per capita population for the next couple of years than we'd had before, if you take population growth into account, but that budget has kind of dealt with that. but it's still very, very tight.
Do you think we should focus a bit more on preventative?
Yeah.
If so, are the BMA doing about preventative medicine? And is there a budget? If so, how much?
Sorry. Heard some. So
Is there a
you
budget
asked.
for preventative medicine, and what's the BMA doing about it? I'm on it. I'll let you go first.
I'll ask the BMA to deal with it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you know, this is a real challenge, because if I want to be really provocative, I can say to you that the size and complexity of our hospitals are a sort of barometer of our failure of preventive health and community services and primary care. And so, and the BMA have been quite good at pointing this out, is that the amount of investment over the years that's gone into primary care prevention has gone down. Now, we're trying to reverse that trend at the moment, but when the money is tight, it puts us into a very difficult tension between how do you maintain your kind of secondary care services whilst at the same time shifting a greater amount of money into prevention, because we all know prevention is better than cure. And the other thing that's really big in this, where we could save a lot of money and maintain quality, is getting people to do more self-care. You know what it's like in banking, they get you to do half the work for them, and you think you've got a better deal. And it's the same, I don't know, when you assemble something that you bought in a flat pack or what have you. We haven't shifted enough of that over to our patients yet, but we're getting there. But you've outlined, in my view, a really important tension, and I don't have an immediate solution to it.
Should I just grab that?
Yes, another question, please.
Yeah, at the outset, I would like to congratulate Lavina on having the idea of bringing out a book, a survival guide for the first-year medicos. But building upon that, I wonder whether you have any sort of plans or any idea to provide support for medical students as they progress as well, in terms of having a sort of mentorship training maybe, so that there is a sort of peer network of senior students supporting juniors throughout, because newer questions will arise, and the book is covering only a little, a small portion. It's a very good beginning, but an ongoing effort maybe.
So just to clarify your question, are you asking to potentially do another edition for elder years? So it's a peer scheme where we're helping each year?
Yes, I suppose so, something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas, so that the students who have already gained from their seniors can give something to their juniors.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a great idea. Just speaking to Sir Bruce earlier, he's given me a few more chapters that he'd like me to write. I think it's a great idea to do other editions for elder years, because obviously this is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more help that could be beneficial to other people in elder years to medical school. So I think that's definitely a part that I could develop on, or anyone else who's inspired to write another book.
As medical students, how do you think we can get involved with medical leadership still whilst at university?
We can all have a go.
We can all,
I'd love to hear from all three of you about that.
Okay, so I can speak to you about the work that I'm doing with FMLM on a university level. There's 3 ways in which you can get involved with medical leadership. We have 3 initiatives at the moment. The first is for those in your older years, you can do a medical elective. So instead of going away, you can be put into a managerial role in healthcare, and that varies depending on where your interest lies. The second is what we're doing is it's an initiative where we're coding the curriculum for each medical school, and we're seeing where we can implement education for management, because as we know, it's not a standardised management in healthcare isn't always taught, and if it isn't standardised across the whole UK curriculum. So that's the second thing. And the third is a hackathon that's occurring this year, and that's where we put all medical students and people interested in finance together in one room, and we give them a problem. So how do you save £10 million in NHS, or how do you reduce waiting times? And you have to come up with cost-effective solutions to those. So if you are interested in any of those things, there will most likely be an FMLN representative at your university. If not, you can also be a part of FMLN or attend any of those 3 initiatives.
I'm not very good at bending over to get to a mic, so I'm just not going to bother. You do not need to see me fall on my face right now. It happens a lot. So, unsurprisingly, I'm going to start by saying the British Medical Association loves medical students. Actually, I have brought somewhere, I think he's hiding, one of the co-chairs of the Medical Students Committee is here. He's definitely hiding. He's lurking over there. So please go and say hello to Harry. He'd love to hear from you. And we have medical student reps in every university, every medical school. So go forth and get involved. Apart from the wonderful work that the British Medical Association does, I think my big tip would just be, like, inform yourself around things that aren't strictly medicine. Because at the end of the day, nobody cares how fast you can recite the Krebs cycle. Honestly, I can't remember what the Krebs cycle is. I'm not 100% sure I ever really learnt it. But my point is, your patients are not going to care about how fast you can do that. They're going to care that you care about them. And if you can get informed on the issues that really affect them, then that's how you can get involved in medical leadership, because you can find out what the problems are, where the problems are, and you can start to think about how to solve them. We're very, very good at going in from a medical perspective and saying, well, obviously our patients want us to do this, right? And we never really ask the sick people. There are loads of them. They're really bored often, sitting in wards, desperate for a chat. Go and talk to them. See what makes their lives difficult. See what they find hard about going through the NHS. And start thinking about how you can change that. I think that's one of the best things that any student can do, is to try and become really informed about issues that affect them and not just that affect the medical profession.
Next question, lady at that.
I have first a comment and then a question. My first comment is I've attended many seminars and presentations, but this is the first one which I've attended where 100% of the speakers have been so inspirational. So thank you so much for that. I'm not in the medical profession, but what you shared I think can be applied to many professions. So thank you. Particularly the first speaker who shared your experiences of having to tackle a disability, which I thought was very, very inspirational and a lesson to us all on how to deal with adversity. So that's my comment. My question is just flicking through the survival guide. Ravina, I've got 2 children who've just started university. Do you think that your book can be applied to other fields and is not just limited to the medical profession?
Thank you. Yes, definitely. I think the majority of this book can be applied to most freshers and first years. There is a section on academia which obviously covers our exams, and that's obviously not relevant, but I think this can be replicated in many different vocational degrees. So yes, I think it can be.
One of the things I find is that when people go to university, they say, I'm studying medicine. I'd love it for people go to university and say, I'm going to study health. What do you think of that?
So, having formerly been a nurse, I would argue that it's not just doctor students that go and study health. So I think we do need to be a little bit careful that we're not risking undermining all the other allied health professionals that we work with. I do see your point. I think we do tend to look primarily at how we cure people, and not necessarily at people. And a lot of the time, there is a big role for preventative medicine. And swiftly swinging back to that previous question, I would direct you to the work of the Board of Science of the British Medical Association, because they've done some really good stuff recently, particularly on mineral alcohol pricing, on air pollution, smoking cessation, all of these things. So there's a lot of preventative medicine stuff going on. But yeah, I think it's a very fair point. We are very good at making a subject that is so fascinating and so exciting, very, very dry and very, very scientific. And we can lose the person in the middle of that. So I do see your point. I think I know a few other professions that might be a little bit cross about it, but I do see your point.
I'll give you an example. I mean, my son's girlfriend, she had 15 ulcers in her mouth. So I've been told that if you eat white cabbage, it gets rid of the ulcers. And she had a load of cabbage the other day, and I phoned her yesterday and said, how's it going? She said, it's going really well. She said, I had a good meal and I could swallow it. So it's just incredible what's out there that traditional medicine probably won't be able to.
I'm now going to be up all night reading about the benefits of white cabbage. Thank you so much for that.
Any other final questions or comments?
Sorry. Yeah. So basically, just wanted to ask. Thank you for all 3 great speeches. I wanted to ask about how you sort of exercise change, whether that's in medical education or with disability rights or in like the whole financial service, especially given that the profession sort of has to be inherently bureaucratic in order to ensure the safety. So like even as committees in medical societies with just like a few hundred students to take care of, we get this great idea. We just find it really hard to roll it out and get people to engage because we see that there are lots of hoops. Sure, obviously that's a lot bigger on the scale you guys are working at. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on how to sort of work with the bureaucracy rather than against it.
I guess that's aimed at me.
Yeah. It's for all 3. Yeah, yes please, yeah.
I think there are kind of different bits to that. So I was taken by something. I was running a course years ago. I was a consultant cardiac surgeon in Birmingham with some other guys, which was for new consultants. And the chief executive of the nearby hospital was a vascular surgeon, and he came along and he said, look, he said, you want something to happen? He said, this is what you do. You tell your mate. He tells his, hers or whatever, and things spread. And he said, if you spread things to a point where enough people want something to happen in an organization, it will happen. So you can kind of do that on a small scale. In the environment in which I work, which is just bogged down with bureaucratic treacle, it's much more tricky. And so you have to engage organizations that you think can help you to do stuff. But there are certain principles, I think, in the healthcare system if you want to do change. First of all, the story of what your change is has to be compelling. So if people go, yeah, great idea, and just walk off, you're kind of losing. You're on a losing wicket. The second thing is that you need to engage people who are the appropriate leaders so that they have a following and they can help spread that narrative. The third thing is that if you want change to happen, you need to let those people who the change affect really take part in it. So you don't want bureaucratic people from above telling people how to do it. And then finally, whatever idea it is that you have, I think you need to develop in conjunction with people who are going to use that idea. So if it's about patients, you need to work with them. If it's with technological people, you need to work with them. But it isn't easy. So I kind of sense that you may have something that you're trying to pursue. You need to find the right organization to help you, and there are people who would be very willing to do that.
So I'm really glad you asked this question, because I have spent the last 2 weeks of my life reading many, many legal papers on a very fascinating topic. So yeah, until 1 AM this morning I was sitting there going, this is why I didn't study law. I mean, I've tried everything else, but I didn't do law. And the bureaucracy that we come across is mind-blowing. I've written 17 iterations of one motion for a meeting in 2 weeks' time, and I'm still fighting with people over it. It takes forever. And sometimes that's a joy. Sometimes you just don't want to do it anymore. I'm being very polite. I'm not quite, but slightly from Newcastle. And we have a phrase up there, which is shy bairns getting out. Okay, I'm going to translate. So shy bairns getting out means shy kids don't get anything. So if you want to get something done, you've just got to be a bit gobby and go and ask. Because the worst that anyone's going to say is no. And then you just go and ask someone else. It's fine. And so I have very swiftly learned to have no fear in walking up to people, or in my case generally rolling or hobbling or stumbling or falling onto people occasionally, or running them over. I'm sorry, I apologised. It's never going to let me live this down. It doesn't even remember. It was a formative moment for me. So go and talk to people. Have the confidence to just go up and say, I've got this idea. You might think it's rubbish. If it is, fine. But, and just see what they say. They might think it's the greatest thing ever. They might think you're an idiot. Many, many people have told me I'm an idiot. There are a number of people in this audience who have previously told me I'm an idiot. And that's okay, because you'll just ask somebody else who gets on with it next time. So go make conversation. Don't hide behind emails. I hate emails because nobody ever reads them. You end up in a hundreds chain of lots and lots of people contributing what they think is really important, and you never get anywhere. Go sit down on someone's desk, because I'm not very good at standing, and just ask them the question. And I think if you try and do that, you'll find that people are way more open to discussion.
So you, Hannah, well, you said that you had some problems. No, it's fine. You said that you had some problems in training, in the sense that training wasn't really accessible to people that weren't disabled. Other than disabled people, what do you think can be done, to make training more accessible? First of all, to disabled people, but also more neurodivergent for people with learning disabilities and stuff.
In training as doctors?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge amount that can be done. I think the first thing we need to do is ask the people that want to do the training that might have the issues accessing it. Because you would not believe how many people have told me what I am going to need when I start a new job, and who have been wrong. And I think the main thing we need to do is we need to open a dialogue. Because every time I start a new job, I'm an F2, so I start a new job every 4 months. Often in a new trust or a new building, and it can be chaos because you'll turn up in a wheelchair, and if you ever want to terrify somebody working in HR, turn up on your first day in a wheelchair. Because the chances are the foundation school will not have warned them. It's so funny. Any contract issues you have for the rest of the year suddenly disappear. It's fab. I wish that were the case. But yeah, I think the best jobs I've started are the ones where somebody has gone, okay, do you know what you're going to need? And generally my answer is no, but I will try and work it out. And they said, great, come back to me as and when you've got problems, let's just keep this conversation open. In contrast, I had somebody say, so how do you do surgery? I'm an F2. I don't do surgery at all. I pass things occasionally and try not to fall into somebody's body. I think having the discussion is really important. I think having the discussion with schools is really important. So I recently supported a young woman who is paraplegic. And I don't know of anybody who's started medical school paraplegic. Maybe somebody can correct me on this, but I'm yet to meet anyone. And she had been told throughout her life that she was never going to be a doctor because she was in a wheelchair and she couldn't stand up. And I met this girl, she's fantastic, she's cleverer than I am, and worked through the interview process with her and said, look, okay, let's turn this around. Let's see how you think your disability, your condition can bring something to the profession. And what makes you different? What makes you a potentially better doctor than somebody who's going to jog in a gym kit? And she got into Leeds. She's starting in September. But she had been told she'd never do that by teachers who thought she would never do that. They were just trying to help. I'm sure they weren't being too negative. But we need to kind of open these conversations earlier, and we need to get more role models out there. So I'm very determined that, yes, I'm going to keep rolling around going, yes, I'm a doctor in a wheelchair. And you'd be amazed how many people go, yeah, but are you like a real doctor? So it's a Saturday afternoon, and I'm here. Do you think I'd be here if I wasn't a real doctor? Really? So I think we need more role models. We need to go out into schools at a younger age, and we need to start having these people more visible. And that's a lot of the work we're trying to do with the GMC at the moment, who have been fantastic recently. They're really, really keen to reach out to people with physical disabilities, people who are neurodifferent, and kind of engage and say, right, how can we support you in the profession? Because I think fundamentally our profession should reflect the people that we care for. And it's very hard to reflect those people if all of us are fighting fit. So that would be my plan anyway, and that's what I hope that we will go on to achieve.
We've got time just for one more question before we break. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for all the talks tonight. They've been really great. So a couple of years ago, a few of us in here, including conveners, spent hours and days locked up staring at computer screens, trying to figure out what were the biggest barriers for innovation in healthcare today. And while we came up with a million things, which some still go over my head, but I'd love to know, kind of in your career, what you've come across that you would say have been the biggest barriers for any innovation that you've tried to start, or other people have approached you with that just haven't, people have had, what are the biggest barriers?
You know, if I'm completely honest, I still haven't unlocked that. So, not invented here is a big issue. Another issue is we can do it better somewhere else. And also trying to be too ambitious about spreading innovation. So one of the things that I get confronted with is people say, well, the NHS is rubbish at innovation. Actually, you know, that's a testable hypothesis. Almost all healthcare systems are pretty slow at taking stuff up unless it's very dramatic. And if you've got a dramatic innovation, it gets taken up quite quickly in the NHS. One of the things that we did some years ago was set up things called academic health science networks, and that's the kind of place to go for your innovation. I was taken by something called Boston Partners, which is a relationship between hospitals and Harvard University in funnily enough, Boston. And they function as a group for spreading innovation. And we figured that if we looked at patient flows across the country, that you could divide them into 15 geographical areas quite clearly, with the exception of some small part of Liverpool. So we divided the country into 15 bits, and we said what we should do is get people with an interest in innovation, an interest in discovery, so universities, interest in innovation. That could be people from British Aerospace or any other industry, pharmaceutical or medtech industries, along with people who run hospitals and people who buy services. And we would give them a certain amount of money every year to try and spread innovation within those areas. And it's been reasonably successful. We're starting to see now that we can get not only innovation spread more quickly, but we can get a contribution into the local economy, because the real advantage of innovation is that it improves quality and reduces costs and frees up money for other things. So that's how one of the things I've tried to do to tackle it. The other thing is the Clinical Entrepreneurs Scheme, which has been mentioned here, which is just engaging young doctors, where those are the minds of art. There are also other kind of legal issues. So people come up with a great idea and then they don't know how to develop a route to market, which is a problem. They don't know about IP, or somebody's trying to rip them off on their IP, usually a university or a hospital. And so we're trying to get under the skin of all of that. But not invented here still remains, in my view, quite a significant issue. I don't know if you guys have anything to say.
So, as a blonde disabled woman, I have never come across any barriers. Just a couple. No, I think one of the issues that people often have in terms of innovation is that everyone thinks it needs to be the next big thing. Like, you know, you're going to go and invent a defibrillator, or you're going to go and do something hugely exciting, revolutionary, and it's going to make you a professor and it's going to be fabulous. But actually, fundamentally, as Bruce said in his speech, as juniors, the small things we can do can have a huge, huge impact. So, for example, my partner's currently on placement down in Torquay. Yeah, St George's send you everywhere, it's crazy. And they have amazing prescription charts. And it means that every patient that comes in, they've already got, you know, the dosages of paracetamol and all the things filled in, so you just need to go, this person needs this, sign it. This person needs this, sign it. And it means that you don't have to sit there and prescribe paracetamol, laxatives if they're having opiates, all of these things individually. You just sign the relevant boxes. And I know that quite a few of the juniors from that hospital have then taken that chart elsewhere and taken it to a different hospital and gone, look, this is great, it saves us so much time. And while we're waiting for the magical NHS IT system that will, you know, talk to itself, it's a really, really useful thing to have. And I think we're too swift to belittle the changes that regular junior doctors can make every day. Because the impact of that on patient care can be huge. It means you've got more time to go and sit and look after somebody who's really, really sick. You've got more time to actually care for patients when you're not spending 27 hours writing a TTO and a discharge summary and just trying not to bash your head against the keyboard of your laptop. So I think we need to be able to think small and see the value in the small innovations. And I think we also need to be allowing doctors take the time to innovate. I know that if you're exhausted and you've just come off a 13-hour shift and that's your fourth in 3 days, the last thing you're going to do is go and create something incredible. You just want to sleep. I always just want to sleep. And I think that's really important. We need to support the workforce so they can go forth and they can do amazing things. And while people are overstretched, while people are exhausted, it's very, very hard to innovate. So I think some of the things we've talked about this evening, some of the programs that are happening are fantastic. We need to see more of those, but fundamentally, we need a workforce that feels they can partake in it. Because as the person who occasionally has to pop out of work for BMA meetings and that sort of stuff, so I can go and change the world, you feel guilty a lot of the time, because you know you're leaving your colleagues behind on the ward one doctor short, so you can go to a meeting that they're not going to necessarily understand the relevance of here and now. And that can be really difficult. So I think until we have sufficient funding, I said the F word, until we have sufficient funding and sufficient support for juniors, then it's going to be really hard to continue the innovations as we'd like to see them.
Can I just add a little something to that? I think your point that innovation is going on the whole time is often forgotten. I forgot it in the answer that I gave just now. You know, yet every hour of every day there's some innovation going on in our health service. And it's those little incremental changes that make a difference. And one of the things that struck me is that really successful innovations have spread. They do two things. First of all, the innovator can demonstrate that what they're proposing will improve the quality of care for their patients. And that is almost always enough to get something kick-started. But if you can add into that, that it makes your working life easier, if you have those two ingredients, you have something that will fly. And it may be small and it may be big. Can I just say something, because this is stuff that I think you guys need to think of. I was talking to Ravina about what I think the 4 big technologies are that you're going to have to grapple with. The first is mobile technology. You know, we run our financial lives, social lives, retail lives, travel lives online. You do it all on your mobile phone. We don't do that with health. So my generation, you guys probably, most of you in the audience won't believe this, but if you wanted to book a holiday, only a few years ago you had to go down to a shop on a Saturday, wait outside, they'd open, you'd be in the front of the queue, you'd get some brochures, you'd sit in a chair, then somebody would call you up, you'd look at the back of a computer screen while they said, where do you want to go? And they typed a bunch of stuff in that you couldn't see, and then they'd say, okay, you can go to this place for 2 weeks or whatever. And off you'd go, and they'd say, we'll send you the tickets in the post. But like booking an outpatient's appointment. And that just doesn't happen in the travel business now. And there's something about how we use mobile technology for changing healthcare into much more of a knowledge transfer business than just a sort of delivery business. And it'll deal with a whole heap of problems for our patients as well. The second thing is artificial intelligence is here in all sorts of different guises, and there are many different types of artificial intelligence. But in some places it's demonstrably better in its diagnostic capability than even experienced doctors. So we have to expect that with the passage of time this will become quite a dominant technology. When you start to couple that with mobile technology, you will start to see that it's quite disruptive to the way that medicine is practiced, and it'll become quite disruptive to how the workforce has to practice, because we've seen that in other industries. The third technology which is going to transform things is genomics. So it wasn't that long ago that it took 10 years to decode a human genome and cost about $2 billion. We now can do it, and this country leads the world almost by about 5 years compared with other countries. You can decode a human genome in well under 24 hours, and you can do it for, depends what granularity you want, but between 500 and 1,000 quid. So, and the price is plummeting, and the speed is getting faster. So that's going to really change the way we do business and run our health services, when we can start to predict who might suffer from what diseases, take preventive action to delay or prevent the disease, and then when it does occur, treat it with more precision. And the final technology is going to be blockchain technology. So you might think, oh, that's just for cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin or something like that. But it looks like it may be a very effective way of creating a kind of distributed medical record that's very secure. And so that kind of stuff, which is quite complicated, is a really disruptive technology in the computing space. And that's going to change medicine as well. And you guys are going to be right there when all of this happens. I mean, this is, we may be grappling with some difficult problems in our NHS at the moment. But hell, it's never been a more exciting time in terms of new technologies that are coming along. It's going to be fantastic. And as I kind of retire, I wish you luck with it, but it's going to be very, very interesting. And it's going to need young minds and young people who are flexible in their approach. And on innovation, one of the things you talk about wheelchairs, one of the sad moments I had was I've led a couple of trade delegations and things during the course of this career, but I was at Lancaster House once, and the kind of Department of Business and Skills were demonstrating British innovation. So they had a hand there, the artificial hand that ran off nerve impulses. They had McLaren wheelchairs made out of carbon fiber that were actually designed to be comfortable and go fast. And a couple of other things. And you know what was sad? The Russians could buy them, the Americans were buying them, the Germans were buying them. And it's always niggled at me, and it comes back to kind of funding. We didn't quite have the money to buy them large scale for the NHS. And so the efficiencies that we make to free up money to do things that our patients need is really important. And we as clinicians, I think, have to take a very significant role in that.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions and for being such an engaged audience. And I'm going to just hand over to Ravina, who's going to give a final vote of thanks before we enjoy some refreshments.
So I'll make it quick. I'd just like to conclude by giving some thanks to several people. So first of all, to the contributors of the book. So that's Professor Kumar, Dr. Thornton, Dr. Warren, Dr. Robson, Dr. Fole, Dr. Patel, Dr. Michael, and student body representatives, Rakeen Chowdhury and Harris. I'd also like to thank my A-level teacher, Mr. Honeysett, who has helped me get into medicine, and he actually cancelled his parents' evening tonight to be here. So thank you. I'd also like to thank my family and my friends for their ongoing support and encouragement with everything. And I'd like to also thank our guest speakers tonight. So Sir Bruce Keogh for his contribution to NHS England through his initiatives, reviews and inspiration to the medical profession. I'd like to thank Hannah for her work with BMA and with the junior doctors. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our host for the evening, Lafina Diamandis, for being such a lovely host and entertaining us. So I'd like to just give you something. So firstly to Professor Bruce, this is for you.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. I didn't expect anything, but the book's important. Thank you.
And the second is for Hannah.
I'll get back and do it again.
And the third is for Lafina. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. I know many of you have come from out of London. You've got train tickets for the event, especially for tonight, and are going back tonight. So thank you for spending your evening with us. I think we have representatives from Cambridge, Oxford, Bristol, and London, so Imperial, King's, St George's, and Barts for London. So thank you all for coming. Have I missed anyone out?
Yes, not in
I work at HKU in Hong Kong.
Okay. So thank you all for coming, and we'd love for you to join us for some drinks and networking here after. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, sir. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you very much. Fine.
What do you think of today's evening, sir?
It's excellent. It's just I teach biology at schools and prepare students for medicines and send them off to universities. But it's not very often I get the chance to actually see what happens afterwards and how they're progressing through their career.
Do you think how Ravina was as a student when you were teaching her in 11th?
Well, I taught Ravina for about 4 years, and she always wanted to be a doctor all the way through. She was very committed from the age of about 14. She worked tremendously hard, and she did lots of other things as well. So it was quite difficult for her to balance her time. I mean, that's probably a good training really for a medical school. But her work was always done on time and always very committed to the cause. So I was so pleased when she finally got her offer and got the grades. I mean, actually, I had no doubt she would get the grades. It was always a question of whether she would actually get the offer. That was the key thing.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I've had an excellent evening.
What do you think of today's event?
I think it's been really fantastic. It's really great as a junior doctor to get to meet some medical students who are so passionate about leadership and to try and infuse future generations. I think the speakers have been excellent. The book looks fascinating. I can't wait to read it. And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about the charity that's launched this evening as well.
Would you like to give any message to the newcomers? I mean, from your side, of course, there is a book, but anything else you want to add to?
As in newcomers to university or to the profession? I think the main thing with university is to really enjoy it and make the most of those years. I did university 3 times, so I'm a bit of an old hand at this. And it's such a formative experience. It's not just about learning all the medicine, learning all the science. It's about growing up. It's about not only becoming the doctor that you want to be, but the human being that you want to be. Getting to know a range of different people from a huge different range of backgrounds. it's a fantastic, fantastic few years. I wish I could go back and do it again, but my bank manager is very glad I'm not going to.
And what do you think of Ravina's efforts of putting the book together? What do you think of that?
I think it's really, really great that this book exists. I kind of wish that there was a book like this when I started medical school. I started as a 26-year-old postgraduate, and I still didn't really have much of a clue in terms of how the medical school aspect worked. So I think it's fantastic that resource is there. I'm really impressed that somebody who's already trying to do a degree has got the time to write a book and put that together. That shows some incredible stamina, so I have no doubt she's going to go far.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're very welcome. You too.
Hi, good evening, sir. How are you today?
Perfect. I'm really enjoying this evening.
What do you think of today's event, sir?
I think it's been really stimulating because, firstly, we've had 3 people sharing ideas and thoughts who are all very different, and that in itself is interesting. But secondly, we've had some really good questions from a young audience, and I think what it does for me as the National Medical Director gives me great confidence in the future of the NHS, no matter what the difficulties are. The intellectual capital for solving the problems of our health service lie not just in the 1.2 or 1.3 million people that work in it, but in particular in the minds and the creativity and the ambition of the young people in the NHS, for whom the future is so important.
And what do you think of effort by Ravina in compiling the book?
I think that book is fantastic. First of all, great credit to Ravina for doing something. She's had an idea, she's made it happen. But not only that, it's a really good idea. So I've looked at that book, and I think if I were going to medical school now, I would have bought that book, and I know I would have read it from cover to cover. But the other thing is, I bet you there are a load of parents who are going to read it from cover to cover.
Any message to the new students who are in the first year or second year, or actually willing to join medical? What would you like to say to them?
I would say, so one thing I'd like to say to people considering going to medical school or new students in medical school, this is the most privileged job in the world. It is the most satisfying job in the world. You won't find anything better, and it's given me enormous personal satisfaction over the years. It is one of the reasons it's such a satisfying job is because it is difficult, because you have to deal with difficult problems, and because you hold such a trusted position in people's lives, and you can do relatively small things, sometimes big things, which have a very profound effect on the life not just of an individual but also of their family, and you can transform people's lives for the better.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Have a good evening, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, good evening, ma'am. How are you today?
Good evening. I'm great. It's great to be here. Very much enjoying the event.
What do you think of today's event?
Well, I think it went fantastically. The organisation was very good. The speakers were absolutely excellent, and we're all enjoying some refreshments and networking now.
And what do you think of the book itself? I mean, how does it help new students, first-year students? What do you think?
Well, I think it's one of the fantastic things about the book is it's written by a doctor in training for other doctors in training. So it's hopefully a completely unbiased from that point of view, and gives really good, honest, sincere advice from one medical student to another. So I think it's going to be incredibly useful for any medical student.
And what do you think of Ravina's efforts to put it together? I mean, what do you think of the efforts she has put in?
To put the book together? Oh, immense efforts. I mean, as I said before when I was introducing Ravina, she's an incredibly humble and hard-working person, and she's got a real eye for detail, and she's absolutely, obsessed with quality. So I'm sure she will have put all her best efforts into this to make it of the highest standard.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Have a very good evening.
And to you. Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening, Ravina. How are you today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you very much.
Tell me a bit about today's event. What's happening?
Okay, so tonight was a night of leadership and innovation. We had some incredible guest speakers. We had Hannah Barham-Brown and we had Sir Bruce Keogh. And they've shared with us some of their experiences from their roles in leadership and the ways in which they've influenced our healthcare system to bring about an amazing change. And I feel us as medical students and some of the junior doctors here can really take stuff from what they've done and the initiatives that they've done in the past to bring about a change in the future, to bring about innovation to our NHS, which does need a revamp and does need a breath of fresh air. And I do feel like they brought a lot of inspiration today.
At what stage did you realize that this book is necessary? I mean, where did this come from?
I'd say, I feel when I was a first year medical student, I think this is something I would have definitely really appreciated. And one of my things on my bucket list almost was to write a book. And I felt this is something I could contribute to and provide some of my knowledge to help others. So I think that's where my inspiration stemmed from. And I'd love for people to tell me how I can improve and what else I can add in the future.
I'm sure you already have some ideas for the next project from this one. Would you like to share anything on that?
I think I'm going to add a few more chapters to the next edition. I think my purpose would be to answer questions that people are slightly scared to ask. And there are a lot of factors that come into play when you start university. And one of those factors are entering a new environment and meeting new people and learning how to deal with bullying and learning how to deal with conflict. And that's something I didn't really touch on. But that's something that I would like to talk to elder people that have been through it, my own peers, and get some more knowledge on how I can write about that in a future edition.
Tell me a bit of summary of the book. Would you like to share something?
Yeah, okay, so The Survival Guide for First Year Medics is a book that encompasses almost every part of a student's life. Well, that has been the aim. So that's ranging from their academia, so how to revise for topics, memory tips, how to manage their time. And then it's also focused on the non-academic, so what societies will be the most useful, how to make friends, how to cook lasagna, and how to sort out things that you may not necessarily know much about, so your finances, what you do when you go to a bank, how to set up a debit card, and just things that I would have benefited from. So I do think there's a lot of scope and a lot more to develop the book. So yeah.
Well, I was flipping through the book and I saw a lot of interesting things. I think this book will be useful for other students as well, not only just medical. What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think everyone who is starting university are welcome to read the book, and I'm sure they'll find something that will be of use to them.
Thank you very much and have a very good evening.
You too.
And all the very best.
Thanks. My name's Simran Goyal and I'm a third year medical student at Cambridge. I think the book is like an amazing idea, and just seeing Ravina as a third year medical student and she's a fifth year, seeing someone with that much passion, with that much sort of those ideas to even write a book in fifth year is quite like inspirational for a third year. So it kind of inspires me to think about what I want to do when or even like what I can do now as a third year, because you kind of underestimate how much you can make an impact. I think coming to this event, seeing the book, you realise how much you actually can do, and seeing Ravina as well. So.
Do you think it would have been good if you had this book when you were in year one, first year?
Yeah, I think it would have been really good actually. So the financial side, and also about like how to get involved in societies, and that you should do that as a medical student as well. So that advice is really good.
Thank you very much.